Many mistakes that I'd seen over the course of the years that to me seemed bizarre all of a sudden fell into place. They became mistakes that I understood. They were a result of lack of fundamental understanding. How do you describe fluids? And at that point, I started to introduce a technique which I've come to call peer instruction, which one could also call cooperative learning. Most of the lecture time I use to actually teach the same material I would do normally, except that every so often, every 15 or so minutes, I interrupt the lecture and place on the overhead projector a question. Imagine a very big bathtub. You can also, if you don't like imagining very big bathtubs, you can imagine a dry dock. And there's a huge battleship in this dry dock. This question is a multiple choice question. It is very simple and it never involves any calculation. It really tests whether the students understand one single basic concept. I give the students about 60 seconds to think about this question. In front of them they have a scanning form on which they can mark their answer, their choice, 1, 2, 3, and so on, as well as their level of confidence in this answer. Okay, take a minute to convince your neighbor of your answer. I ask the class, I ask each student actually, to explain his reasoning to any neighboring student. And what happens is striking. You always get the entire class, all 200 and some students, talk to one another in a very animated discussion. After these 60 seconds pass, I ask them to mark a revised answer and a revised confidence. How many of you on the second try chose choice 1? Okay, about 10%. Spill over, 2. 5% stay exactly brim full. Must be the balance.
Okay, what do you think about that strategy?
I think it's a nice strategy, except I hope he does give them the right answer at the end.
He does. Actually, I mean, now he uses these clickers, so it's much easier, and then the graph pops up, and they could see immediately in real time what the answer is. I mean, this is the element that's so important here. It's testing it out, knowing for yourself if you're being engaged with the material, constantly, continually. And also the element where he says, convince your partner. Have you experienced that part? To convince your partner about the topic?
But I wonder if a purpose of using such a technique is to arrive at one correct answer out of many, which would be perfect in a math or physics hard science class, but in a humanities class, I don't know if it would be applicable unless we specifically focus on the process of discussion, because there you would have a variety of different answers.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't necessarily have one right answer. It would be the idea of people being able to do that in such a huge class. Because often people say, well, the class is so big, what can you do? All you could do is lecture. So then you would have a lesson design that is really, the teacher talking for a certain period of time, because what can you do? It's so many students. So I think that sort of tries to get at that idea that you can have all sorts of discussions going on in a room that has, potentially 500 people. But it's ways of keeping the students engaged. So they're not falling asleep, so they're not going off on their computers and Facebook and everything else, because they are engaged with the material. And they're not like, well, I'm just one of many, nobody notices me, I could just disappear and stay inattentive. It sort of demands continual attention and talking to your neighbor, you have to keep up. So it's one of the strategies for participation, certainly. So some more sample strategies that one could use is asking the students at the end, what's the muddiest point? What don't you understand, or what's still muddy for you? Asking for little reaction papers at the end of classes, 1-minute papers, little short summaries. These are also sort of summative little activities that one could do. Many, many strategies. The one that I was going to use with this group is something called a jigsaw. So we were going to be watching this video of a class that wasn't so good, and task this half of the class to look at what could have been done before, to structure it differently, and this class will, now that the discussion has gone awry, what could the teacher do? So again, you can have, if you're doing, for example, a novel or a poem or something like this, so you can have one part of the class or one member of a team that's looking at the metaphors, another one that's looking at the character, the characters in the novel. So you can have like different groups responsible for different things. You can have the theme. You can have the idea of the jigsaw is that not all members of a team work on the same thing. So there's different kinds of techniques that you could use when you're planning for these strategies. And one that I love using is think, pair, share. You think about it on your own, you pair up with the person sitting next to you, and then you go around the class, you sort of whip around, and then everybody shares their ideas. That's another useful technique. This is a very interesting question. How long do you think that most teachers wait when they ask a question?
10 seconds.
10 seconds? Any other guesses?
Depends if they need to reflect or not.
Well, 10 sounds good, but the research has shown that it's 1 second. They ask the question, they immediately answer their own. It's really uncomfortable. That silence in the classroom is very uncomfortable, and they've timed this. And so part of the process, the technique of asking questions is to allow for reflection. So sometimes it's forcing yourself, putting the question up, waiting, giving a chance, asking students to write things down, and then inviting them. Because also you're trying to privilege everybody. Otherwise you're privileging the really quick ones, the ones that have the answer before you've even finished speaking. And the others never have a chance for their brains to start thinking about the question. So like this, even the ones who have their hand up, they're dying to tell you, you're giving them the opportunity to calm themselves, to wait, to think it through, and you're giving other people the opportunity. And so often, because I observe teachers, I go in the classrooms to give feedback, and I see teachers, they just love it. As soon as someone's got the answer, and they go, and they never give other people the chance. So that's really, that's an important part of the lesson design process. So you just sort of include it right there, and you force people to do their work before you entertain questions. And then at the end is the closure. So you're not just ending in the middle of your lesson and then you realize, ooh, the time is up. But you're ending with some kind of a closure. What's the culminating point? What was the point here? It's like the sandwich, the end of the sandwich part, right? It's like you tell them again what this was all about, or you invite from others to help you to do the closure. So what did we learn here today? What was significant about this particular lesson? So again, it could be another quote that matches the original Bridgen quote, that sort of puts it into perspective, but something where you're ending off with because what the research also shows is that students remember when they first come into the class the first thing you said, and they remember the last thing you said. So it's because they know that they're leaving, so they sort of look, bring themselves awake. So it's important to end off well.